Hello everybody and welcome back to RPG Radio. My name is Winback, and on today's episode we're going to be working on our Oppressor. We've made it up to Ultimate, we've hit 94, so all of the gear is looking nice and toasty, and we have significantly trimmed down our action bar to only the essential skills and only what's going to be going on. So, thank you for showing up for part 2. If you watched part 1, feel free to let me know what you think of the build in the comments below, as well as what you thought of the leveling, if that was helpful or not. But I promise you there are quite a few changes, so you may find yourself doing a lot of updating on your own side if you are following along with this build at home. This is a YouTube video though, so feel free to like, comment, and subscribe your heart out. Do the bell thing, do the YouTube stuff. I'm sure you're in love with that by now, but let's talk about some oppression. Now, the Oppressor number 1 is, it's not as tanky as I want it to be. This class did fall off the squishy road quite a bit, and it took me definitely some effort to get all of my resistances back up to where they were. So, or where they need to be. So, overmaxed beyond the 80%, and with at least 20 to 30% physical resistance. All of that being said, some of that physical resistance is going to be conditional based on the Oathkeeper skills, but we'll get to that later. Now, this build ultimately is going to be doing acid and vitality damage, and if you couldn't tell from this or the last video, that is going to play a huge part. There is also a lot of acid retaliation going on just because of the way that our gear and our masteries and all that stuff kind of works in tandem, so more of a happy accident than anything, but still works really good. If you were following the lore through at all, my Sentinel in that playthrough is very similar to the Oppressor, but I definitely have them distinct enough from each other that we can get some level of uniqueness, even if it's very small. Now, the reason that the Oppressor is big different from the Sentinel, at least in my opinion, is Ravenous Earth and the unreliance on the Captain America shield. So I've been hearing that there are some updates to that within the Grim Dawn Community League. The season's there. I have not personally touched the Community League, so maybe that is a video for another day. But as it stands right now, this build is all about Ravenous Earth and using that in tandem with Judgment and Fire's Might to deal maximum AoE damage with our devotions, our eyeballs, and all of the other fun stuff in our kit. Now, that said, the Aegis was one thing, the Captain America shield was one thing that we had in the previous video that is now completely forsaken. We took all of the points out of that and put them into the 2 modifiers for Foul Eruption. So, no, sorry, Foul Eruption is one of the modifiers. The Ravenous Earth is the ability, and the 2 modifiers for that are where all the points went from the Aegis of Menhir. Now, with all those points, we got to use Decay and Foul Eruption. Those are the 2 modifiers, and that is going to be increasing the vitality and poison damage of the ability while reducing the target's damage for 1 second when they are hit. That's coming from Decay, and then Foul Eruption is going to give us a percentage reduction to the enemy's health, as well as flat vitality and aether damage, and a reduction to the target's resistances for 5 seconds. That's 25 reduction on that bad boy. Needless to say, since this is kind of our keystone ability for this build, we wanted to dump as many points into it as possible to make sure that it's doing maximum damage to all these big, hefty ultimate enemies, and that is exactly what it is doing. Now, on top of that, we've got that Ravenous Earth, we've got that affixed to the Guardian's Gaze Devotion. Guardian's Gaze is going to be launching a whole bunch of eyeballs around us in a hula hoop formation, and those are going to be dealing damage when we splat into people. sorry, it's not, the devotion is not Guardian's Gaze, it's Eye of the Guardian. I think Guardian's Gaze is the actual skill that comes with it. But this devotion is going to give acid, poison, chaos damage, and then 8% vitality resistance. So pretty small stats, all things considered, but the vitality resistance is fine, and the Guardian's Gaze is doing quite a bit of work for us as well. It's a 15% chance on attack, and considering that it is tied to Ravenous Earth, which just spews chunks of stuff in a huge AoE all over the place, it has an extremely easy chance to activate. It's got a 0.5 second skill recharge, so you don't get a whole bunch of eyeballs all at once, but you still can get them really fast. And they deal 15% of our weapon damage, as well as chaos and poison damage on top of that. So with the number of eyeballs that pop out, that might not seem like a lot of damage right off the top, but what is it, 15% weapon damage? That means that 6 or 7 eyeballs is going to be doing just as much as your weapon damage, and they do hit pretty hard when there's multiples. Considering that Vire's Mite is one of our other big abilities on this build, we are going to be able to dash through a lot of people and get a lot of eyeball traction out of this skill. So it's really good. I highly recommend. Super love it, especially if you're playing an acid build that does a lot of melee focused fighting. Now, Vire's Mite is going to be the more important of the next couple abilities, even though in the last video we talked more about Judgment, but Vire's Mite is specifically very important in Ultimate because you need to be able to move very often with this build. Since it's not the tankiest thing in the world, you have to be able to get in and out of danger relatively quick, and Vire's Mite checks all those boxes for us. So Vire's Mite doesn't require you to have a target. You can just select where you want to go, and the character will fly towards your cursor, which, thank God, because that is definitely the easiest way to get out of big clumps of enemies. That being said, though, Vire's Mite is not going to be doing a lot of acid damage, if any at... well, no, because we do have some conversion going on, but ultimately, Vire's Mite deals weapon damage, physical, piercing, and internal trauma damage, as well as giving us somewhat of a taunt. Makes people just attack us more because it generates additional threat. That being said, though, the modifier for Vire's Mite that you're going to want to take for 1 point is called Volcanic Mite, and that is going to 100% convert the physical damage on the ability to fire damage. And that might seem bad, but there's a reason for that, and that would be the passive called Path of the Three. I mentioned last video that we might be getting rid of it, but ultimately, with the way that the build is working, it makes more sense to keep it. So, since Vire's Mite is going to be doing 100% more, or 100% fire damage now, Path of the Three converts fire damage to acid damage, and converts less physical damage to... is it vitality or is it acid? Whatever it's doing, it's converting 15% physical damage, and it's converting almost 50% fire damage. So, the fire damage that we're getting from Vire's Mite is now half acid damage. So that's really good for our build, really good for our damage, and that's the reason that we went with the modifier. Now, Tectonic Shift is the other thing that we'll be taking. Tectonic Shift is the last mastery for Vire's Mite, and that is going to decrease the cooldown. That's the only reason that we really want it. Obviously, it's going to be doing other things like bleeding damage and increasing internal trauma duration, as well as damage. But mostly what we want is the range increase and the skill recharge. So we basically have a 2.5 second Vire's Mite with this Tectonic Shift mastery. And like I said, movement is very important, especially when there are lots of enemies in Ultimate that can kill you very, very quickly. So we can't stand there and tank things like we can with some of our other classes. So Vire's Mite is incredibly important for diving, dipping, dodging, and dodging, you know? And then our last big ability for the kit here is going to be Judgment. So Judgment is suddenly not working the way that I remembered it to be working. And I don't know if that's something going on in my build or if I've just been too dumb to notice that it doesn't work this way normally. But my initial idea when I made this build is that Judgment pulls people in, and it is going to let Ravenous Earth deal a lot of damage as they come towards me. As I've been playing up in Ultimate, people just get knocked down. And I feel like that's different, but at the same time, all the tooltips are just saying it knocks the target down and taunts them, yada yada. So maybe I'm just experiencing some massive Mandela effect, but whatever the case may be, Judgment is going to knock people down, and Ravenous Earth is still going to be able to dump huge chunks of acidic barf all over them from the earth itself. So Judgment still very, very, very good at knocking down big groups of enemies. It also does some damage of its own. Ultimately, it is going to be dealing physical and internal trauma damage. So it's not the greatest thing in the world. And then Heart of Wrath, we put a few points into that just to get some of our retaliation added into the damage of Judgment. But that's also adding fire. Fire is getting converted to acid. There's a small amount of acid on this ability, but mostly it is for the AoE knockdown, the AoE crowd control that it performs and helps with Ravenous Earth. So it has not been the greatest thing of this playthrough, but it certainly fulfills its purpose better than any other ability in the either Necromancer or Oathkeeper kit. So it's good. Take it. It's really good. Now there is an honorable mention for Mark of Torment. That is our final activatable ability from our Necromancer Tree. Mark of Torment is going to place a mark on a target, and that mark is going to take, I think it's 50... No, we absorb 50% of the damage, and we deal it back to the marked target 300% or so. I think that's what the number is. I can't remember. But ultimately, it's more for keeping us alive. We block a lot more damage while the Mark of Torment is up, and survival is very important, especially when you, again, get one shot super hard by some monsters in Ultimate difficulty. But just an honorable mention. I've got the full 10 points in it. Feels good. Makes me happy. I like being able to click a button and then panic. You know what I'm saying? And then the last couple abilities that we funneled points into for this build are, I may have needed to mention this earlier, but we've got Summon Guardian of Hirian. This is currently over the level limit. It's at about 21 points. And then we've also got the modifier Scion of Drink. So all of the damage of the Guardians are going to be changed from physical and elemental to vitality and acid. So that's why they're green. That's why they slap in the type of damage that we need to. They're not super complicated, though. They don't die. They scale off your own bonuses rather than pet bonuses. So they're very important, but they're not especially flashy. So they're just a little acidic bodyguards, and they are super helpful. Make sure to take them, because if you turn them off or forget to turn them on, you'll notice the damage drop, I promise you. These guys hit very hard, but it is easy to forget that they're there. Now there's a couple more abilities in this build that require some mentioning, and number one is going to be Presence of Virtue. I believe we've got 1 point in the Presence of Virtue itself, and then we've got maximum points in Haven. Haven is going to increase healing effects, going to increase your shield block chance, and increase your shield, the amount of damage that your shield can block. It's also giving us a plus 30% to health. So this aura is very, very good, very important for being tanky, especially on a class that is, it's about halfway tanky. I would call it, if I had to speak in MOBA terms, I'd call it a bruiser more than I call it a tank. After that, you're going to have another passive called Resilience. This one is going to only activate when you drop below 66% health, but this is going to give you a bunch of defensive ability. It's a 12% DA increase, and then increase your healing effects, which is fine. It's not like we have those. But it's also going to give you 12% physical resistance, as well as 5% to your all of your resistance's maximums. So you're going to see on the screen right now a very difficult enemy for us to kill, because the enemy that we're fighting has a lot of acid resistance, and definitely a little bit of mano-y-mano going on there. It sucks that it's taking so long, but ultimately, as long as we're paying attention, dipping and diving with Virus Mite and all of our Ravenous Earths, we're going to win. It's just a matter of not getting slapped really hard when we're not paying attention. But anyway, the remainder of the skills in the Oathkeeper tree, well, there's only one. So I've got Shattering Smash. The reason I've got Shattering Smash is because the shield that I have in this build is the Oculant, and the Oculant is going to modify Shattering Smash to do acid damage, which is fantastic. But Shattering Smash is an auto attack modifier. It's got a 26% chance to be used, 8-meter range. You'll see it occasionally. It's kind of a line, it looks like a shockwave. But yeah, it also reduces target's physical resistance for 5 seconds, and it deals physical and internal trauma damage, as well as acid damage from the shield. The shield is also converting 100% of the physical damage into acid damage. So really rocking stuff there. That's the reason that I wanted to put points into it. Now onto the Necromancer Tree. No, that's it. We've already done everything in the Necromancer Tree, because we've only got Ravenous Earth and Mark of Torment over there. So, all that being said, we mentioned Path of the Three earlier. Don't forget that one. It's not because it's, you know, like, incredible or anything, but it does work very well with the synergy in the build. Now, devotions are a little bit on the back end, but I do want to mention that this build has a lot of halfway devotions. So if you need those, definitely go check out the Grim Tools link, because these devotions are a little bit of all over the place, but they still do exactly what I want. So the big finished devotions that we have are going to be Vulture, Spider, Eye of the Guardian, Scholar's Light, Manticore, Empty Throne, and Toad. But after that, well, no, there's also Chariot of the Dead. Chariot of the Dead, a very, very good ability that is giving some defensive stats, which are really important to this build. I don't think I have to mention that anymore, but remember, Chariot of the Dead is a completely filled out devotion. Now the first halfway devotion on this tree is going to be Affliction. I only took the first 3, and that is just to get the Fetid Pool devotion ability, which is, you know, thematic for the build, but also pretty helpful in what it's doing. It's dealing vitality, poison, and 8% of our retaliation damage in a 3-meter radius when we get hit, or there's a 33% chance when we get hit. So it's also slowing targets. It's pretty cool. But after that, you don't need anything else. Next would be Hirian, Guardian of the Celestial Gates. This is the Griffin. We have got 6 points into that, and only the first 3, and, oh no, sorry, 5 points into that. The first 3, and then the last 2 to get up to Hirian's Glare. This is going to give a 10-meter range, weapon damage, retaliation damage, and elemental damage, but it's also going to give a 100% chance to confuse a target for 1 second on a 30% hit us chance. So 30% of the time, Hirian's Glare will be going off. Another 33% of the time, Fetid Pool will be going off. And then, yeah, so those two are pretty cool for what they're doing defensively. They're really, really helping out. I like them a lot. And then Tainted Eruption coming from the Abomination. I use this one on my Sentinel as well, but we're just going to go right up the middle with 3 points, and then right down his right arm with 3 points as well to get the Tainted Eruption. That is just a massive AoE poison and confusion bomb. It's fantastic. Highly recommend it. Don't forget it. Now I want to take a second to pause the video to talk about the gear because I've been missing this pretty hard with the last couple build videos. So let's dive in super thick like. With this build, there are a couple of very important pieces that are already in play, and that is going to be number one, your dagger. This is called Pandemic. Pandemic is going to be giving points to Ravenous Earth, but it's also going to be reducing the cooldown of Ravenous Earth by half a second, putting a vitality damage into Ravenous Earth as well, and it's also going to add a vitality decay, and the ability to reduce poison and acid, as well as vitality resistance to summon Guardian of Hirian. So Pandemic is extremely good for two of our key abilities in this build, and I really haven't found a good other thing for it. Voice of Dreeg is our helmet. This one is also modifying Ravenous Earth. It's putting acid and more acid and poison damage into Ravenous Earth, and a 20% chance to blind targets who are hit as well. So super good defensive stats there. Makes a lot of sense to have it. Now there are 3 pieces of the set that is oh god, what's it called? Deception of Dreeg. We're not going to go full Deception of Dreeg because it requires us to use a hood and the rune dagger, neither of which I really want to use. So, Mythical Black Gem of Dreeg is going to give you the Gaze of Dreeg, which are the little eyeball, kamikaze eyeballs that float around us. They are pets. They scale with player damage bonuses though, so they work just like our Guardians. We've also got the Mantle of Drink. This one isn't modifying anything specifically, but it is giving us some health and offensive, defensive ability, as well as converting vitality damage to acid, which is always good. It's anywhere from 20 to 30% according to the Grim tools, but still super good. Doesn't actually give us any points into any of the abilities that we're working with here, which is a little bit sad, but at the same time, not a big deal. None of the armor that is in this set is going to be doing that, so it's another good reason to only have 3 of the pieces. The Vestments of Dreeg are going to be following along kind of the same path. They're going to convert some vitality damage to acid, give us health, defensive ability, but really, you know, they're just there for those stats and to give us the 3-set passive of the set itself, which is 100% offensive ability and 12% physical resistance. The 2-set bonus is acid damage and poison damage, up another 120%, which is pretty good. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's nothing to write home about either. And then the last 2 armor items that are going to be really important for the builds, well, last 3, I guess we haven't mentioned the shield. The Oculant is going to give us +1 to all skills in Oathkeeper, and then add acid damage to Shattering Smash, as well as convert the physical damage on Shattering Smash. Super good. Also gives us a skill 30% chance on block to provide us with some acid damage, some flat acid damage, as well as buffed acid and poison damage and acid retaliation. So pretty good, all things considered. I actually love this shield and it makes a lot of sense. But the metal is up next. This one is the Rot Drinker Crest. This is going to give us acid, vitality, health, and it's going to give +3 to Foul Eruption and Rotting Fumes. Rotting Fumes, not a big deal, but Foul Eruption, super big deal for our Ravenous Earth damage. It also comes with its own passive ability called Debilitating Rot, and that is going to do a 15% reduction to the enemy's health over 10 seconds with a -20% total speed debuff on there too. Lastly, there is the Mythical Pack of Deadly Means, which is +3 to Ravenous Earth, +1 to all skills in Oathkeeper, and the passive doesn't matter at all because this one's mainly for the stats.